Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Midlife Edit. Last week got a little dark. I talked about mental health things and things that I've been going through, and honestly, I just want to keep going on the topic of mental health and how we can heal from trauma. So today's guest is an amazing one who she's a certified Hakomi therapist and complex trauma healing practitioner. Her name's Shelly Sharon, and she helps women heal from complex relationships with their mothers so that they can thrive in things like their lives and careers. And she came to this work from own personal experience from child neglect, and now she's really committed to helping women ditch the guilt and shame and know that they don't have to carry this alone, and know that it's okay to not be okay and it's not your fault. So, without further ado, please listen to this amazing conversation with my friend, Shelly Sharon. Shelly Sharon, welcome to the Midlife Edit. It is so
Happy to be
nice
here.
to have you here. And we're just going to jump right in. We talked a lot we talk a lot in this podcast about midlife and how not only our health physically matters, but mental health and taking care of ourselves matters as well. And with that is taking care of all of the issues that we've never taken care of before in our past that we may not realize are there. And so today I want to talk to you about all of the work that you do, because I think that it's an excellent tie-in to what I've been talking about personally on my podcast with mental health and how we can't take care of others until we figure out what's going on with ourselves. So I know that you've lived this work both personally and professionally. Can you just start out by sharing what your work is and why this topic matters to you so much and how you kind of got into it? What brought you to this specific type of work?
Thank you. So I help women who've had a complex relationship with their mother unpack the way that it influenced them and hold them back in their current adult life. So in short, I help women heal the mother wound so they can thrive in their lives, in their career. I was born to a mother with mental illness, and I suffered a lot of neglect and some abuse as well. So I basically had to find a way to grow up by myself, to invent the script, to make sense of the narratives around me without much guidance, not to talk about safety. It took me quite a while to turn towards my own mother wound, because when I grew up and when I reached my, let's say, 20, I think, I actually left my house when I was 16, which is quite unusual. And in my 20s, I thought, well, surely I'm an adult now. I don't need to be bothered by my past and by my history and by my relationship with my mother. And who really chooses to look at the painful events and experiences with one's mother, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just did everything in my power to get away from that and to run away from that and to turn my back to it. And I got married, I started my bachelor degree, and I reached a point where I was really quite miserable. I was married to Mr. Perfect. Bless him, he was a great guy, but he was just the wrong person for me. Everything was a repetition from what I heard from my own family. Like, why can't I be more or less of, fill in the blank? Probably everything that, or most of what many women heard in their life, in their household. Too sensitive, a little bit more normal, less this, more of that. There was a lot of that in that marriage. Also, he wanted me to become a housewife, which was definitely not the way that I envisioned myself. And I just suffered, and I felt like I was going into a smaller and smaller and smaller corner of my existence. And it was one day when I had a conversation with a very good friend. At that time, I was a ballet dancer, and we both danced in the same with the same teacher. And she had a similar background to mine, meaning she also had a dysfunctional relationship with her mother, which was something that was completely new to me because I didn't have anybody in my surrounding that spoke about their relationship with their mother. So I felt like I was completely alone with that. And so her relationship allowed me to first feel like I'm not this alien that has to be so ashamed of her relationship with her mother. But also, one day when I was waiting to meet her and just hang out after ballet practice, she told me, I've got to do something first, then I'm going to come meet you. And when I was waiting for her in a beautiful autumn day, I can really remember that vividly, sitting on a street bench and seeing her approaching me, glowing, beaming. And I thought to myself, ooh, what is Shrimby up to? And she told me she's just got back from a session with her psychologist. That was surprising to me, both because, of course, I didn't know that was happening for her. But also, at that time, I was dead set against any kind of therapy, psychologists, psychiatrists. I've seen so many of them with my mother. And there was a lot of what I would call medical negligence, because if anybody really knew anything about what was going on with my mother, and there were quite a lot of practitioners, mental health practitioners, who knew exactly what my mother's mental state was and what her capacity to hold on to a job, for example, was, which was hardly existent. They knew what was going on at home, and it was just my mother, myself, and my sister. So I thought, when I grow up, the last person on earth I want to see is a psychologist or psychiatrist. Not to mention, I did not have that in the script for myself to become a therapist. But seeing her and having that sense of belonging with another woman that understands what it's like, that doesn't judge you, that has the sensitivity to approach that tender matter, made a huge difference for me. So there you go. I decided to take her phone number, and it was a seriously pivot in my life. It still took me quite some time to get to the point where I felt like I really had something to give to others. I think I have a great sense of responsibility, probably because of the childhood experiences that I've had with mental health professionals in childhood with my mother, to make sure that what I'm offering has enough depth, enough knowledge, and enough personal experience all together in order to hold that space for other women. But there was a point where I felt like, okay, I've been a ballet dancer. I had my own business as a coffee shop owner. I was working at a gourmet restaurant. I was a computer programmer. And then I finished my master's degree in special education. And it felt like some robust confidence was germinating inside of me. And the thought came up, if I had been able to do all these and to be quite successful in all the endeavors I've had so far, maybe I'm ready to turn towards that lifelong yearning to just be myself. And to just be myself meant to use all these intuitive capacities to look into oneself and to have all these, what I today understand as psychological kind of appetite, and to help other women reach the same thing and know that it's not their fault. there's nothing to be ashamed of, or there is a way to get released from the shame, and that they deserve to be adored.
I love it. It's not their fault. I that phrase sometimes I think is so easy to say, but it's so powerful to hear when you've grown up or even, realized, oh my gosh, this is what's going on with me. What did I do when I was younger to make this happen? And for somebody releasing you from that and saying, hey, this isn't your fault, sometimes that's all a person needs to hear. I love that. So when you say mother wound, what does that really mean? Like, is it something that we could just put a band-aid on? Is it something that everybody has? Is it something that you have to find deep inside of you, or do you kind of already know? Kind of explain that term and how you use it in your practice.
For me, the simplest way to understand and frame the mother wound is it comes from a dysfunctional, chaotic, even traumatizing relationship with your mother, which has a significant impact and influence on all the other relationships. So 3 areas. First is the relationship with ourselves, then the relationships with others, close and afar, and the relationship with life or our public spaces, which includes communities and our vocation, our careers. So the mother is a primal source for a relationship in life. It starts really from, it really starts with the grandmother, and we know that with the biology research today. But when we're in our mother's womb, there's already a relationship forming. I like giving this analogy. Think about a relationship that you have with somebody new in your life. Maybe it's a partner, perhaps it's a neighbor or a colleague. Now, take that relationship 9 months forward. Isn't that crazy? So much is happening in that relationship, and so many influences and inputs, and the dynamic that forms and the shared space that you're having with that person. Now, that happens with a mother when we're vulnerable and dependent, really amplifies exponentially the significance of that relationship in our life, in who we are, how we see life, how we're becoming. And so many of us, probably many women, East and West, have some degree or some form of a mother wound, because the mother wound is not just an occasional experience between mother and daughter, but it is situated in the social, economical, and political context, which we know that is not in favor of women for centuries.
Sure. Yeah.
So all the limiting beliefs, all the imprisonments, everything that forms a woman and how she perceives herself and her right to be an equal citizen of the planet is influenced by that. And it's inherited in the relationship with your own personal mother. Now, some mothers have done some healing work in some form or another, whether it's with a therapist or with communities or with their own intuitive sense of healing, and understood how to break free from the hurts of their own mother in order to offer something else. But it's the case of few so far. So the majority of women do have to face their own mother wounds. So the significant losses, the significant absences that continuously happened in that relationship. So when we're little, we're very much motioned by our survival mechanisms. We're still very much motioned by that. But as we gain more experience and more independence, we have different capacities available and developed that are not developed or fully developed as we are young. A relationship, coming back to what the mother wound is and the framework of the relationship, being dependent on your relationship with your mother, this is the way that the babies or a young child goes. Mommy is not available, which means something here is wrong. How can I make it better? Because if mom's not well, I'm not well. If mom is not able to provide for me, then I'm not going to be okay. I'm not going to be able to survive. All that is happening instinctually. Really, right? We don't need to think about it at all. So when that happens continuously enough times, then we get the impression, oh, probably it's my fault. Because when I make an effort, then things become somehow better. And that later on translates to, are you the woman who always tends to other people's needs without knowing how to give at least the same amount of attention to your own needs? Are you the person who everybody relies on, but when you need somebody or when you just feel like you want to, relax a little bit and put your head on somebody else's shoulder, you feel like it's impossible. You don't even see those people around you anymore because maybe you didn't set up those circles around you because there has been a role that formed from that relationship with your mother that didn't allow you to form these kind of circles as you grow up, or because we haven't actually developed that kind of lens to see who is there that is able to help us. We can't even see them, even if they're just, below our noses. So I'm kind of like feeling, I'm happy that you picked up on that. It's not your fault, because this is a very common thread that runs for many women. And I'd like to add to that when we start the process of healing the mother wound, the way that it translates is feeling guilty. Mm-hmm. I feel guilty for talking about my mom, or I'm feeling guilty for wanting to step away from the familiar dynamic that is really excruciating for me, but the guilt does stand in the way, or feeling guilty for even having some unfavorable thoughts about your mother. So the sense that it is our fault then in the beginning of the healing process translates into some form of guilt.
Yeah, spot on for the next thing that I want to ask you, because there are times where, society shows us TVs, movies, everything else. There are times where you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. This person has a mother wound because their mother was physically abusive and got arrested, or, they were literally never around, or there was something bad wrong with their mother as society sees it. What about the women who are, and especially in midlife now, people are just starting, we start to realize a lot of things about ourselves in midlife. So what about the women who, like you said, start to feel guilty because, look, maybe your mom provided everything that she could financially for you, or you were always fed and you always had a roof over your head, but you didn't feel loved, or you felt like you had to worry about her feelings instead of your own, or, the emotional part of that mother wound that we don't see because you can't physically see it. So if there's somebody out there listening right now thinking, oh, okay, well, my mom, she always paid for all my activities and she fed me, so I must be okay. what would you say to them, and how to start looking into healing themselves, because they do feel less than. They do feel like they're not good enough, and it all stems from that overdying need to impress their mother or make sure that their mother's okay.
Yeah, such a great question. I want to start by giving you a metaphor. Think about a woman, a mother, who carries, I think it's called piggyback, who
Mm-hmm.
carries her daughter on the back. Yeah, you see, you have an immediate smile on your face, right? It brings memory. Now flip it over. Think about the girl carrying her mother on her back. And this is the kind of image that I want you to have in your mind when you think about a girl who, from a very early age, prematurely needs to carry her mother's unresolved traumas, her sadness, her unfulfilled life, um, her lack of reciprocity and love, and even um, a response to her sexual desires with from her partner. So when you think about it like that, I think for most listeners, it'll immediately, intuitively, feel like, no, this is wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is wrong. So, of course, and especially when you have a tender heart, when you have a caring heart, then you'll even more lean towards impressing your mother, wanting to make sure that she's happy, that she's satisfied. But one thing that I'm helping all of my clients understand is you can't fix your mother, and it's not your job. She might be able to jump on board with you in that healing process, but you're doing that for yourself and hopefully also for your children and everybody around you. But you can't fix your mother, nor it is your job. So this is the real meaning of compassion: to witness the suffering of our loved ones, knowing that there is a limit to what we can do. And one of the other things that I'm helping my clients move towards is building those building blocks to understand what is it that you can do for your mother without taking her on your back, because it's impossible. So when women hear that and think, my mother did her best, for example, maybe she did, maybe she didn't. I don't know. I meet a lot of women with many life stories, and sometimes it's true that a mother does her best, and sometimes it's not necessarily so. When I hear other sentences like you brought into example, I invite women to think about that metaphor of that reverse of roles, because that reverse of roles, first of all, is not natural. So in younger age, we just don't have those skills to be a mother to our mother. We just don't have that life experience. We just don't have that width of emotional bandwidth in order to both make sense of our own developing emotions and our mothers. So yes, in TV you will see a lot of dramatizing, and life is not TV. It's a good entertainment, it's a good catharsis to some kind of, unexpressed feelings. But the spectrum of the mother wound is huge. And I have a lot of respect to every woman with any kind of suffering that she's experiencing, because only we can say what unmet needs we had in childhood that were not met. So if I come back to my example, yes, I was a very sensitive girl, but that doesn't make me into some kind of faulty human being. But that is exactly the way that I was treated. Yeah. I always had a very creative imagination. I've always had a connection to the spiritual realm. That doesn't mean that I'm weird or I'm deficient in some way if there are other skills that are not as developed as these skills. But that's exactly how I was meant to feel. Now, I also want to bring in the cultural aspect, because I get to work with women who come from different cultures, and cultures who have, for example, a very strong family values, especially when the girl, the daughter, is seen as the surrogate to the mother, or the one who needs to take care of the mother and the other siblings when they are in the family. That is a huge burden to carry. Yeah, so we when I work with women, I look at all these different circumstances and the unmet needs of the individual woman that I'm working with, to find a way to de-dramatize the perception that we have around, and it's the antidote to the fault, around what is it that I really deserve, and how we can unhinge ourselves from the limiting beliefs that we cultivated in a household that gave us the impression that it's our responsibility to make mommy happy, or it's our responsibility to impress her, and to make a lot of effort in order for that to happen. So one of the core, I'll say, aspects of the mother wound that I see in almost every culture that I meet, in every life story that I see, is the idea that forms that as a woman, we need to make a lot of efforts, unbalanced efforts, excessive efforts, in order to compensate and to complement these unmet childhood needs. And I actually have a private podcast on that, which is called Birthright, with RITE. That can be found in shellysharon.com/birthright. And I talk about the three main efforts that I'm seeing women do in order to compensate on that sense of fault. So that could come in the form of pleasing, or feeling not deserving, and preventing oneself from really following one's dream or asking for help. These efforts come from that metaphor of imagining us carrying our mother on our back in a premature age, where we had to kind of, in a rush, like a house on fire, find the shortest way to compensate and complement what is missing, or otherwise we're going to be consumed with this whole story.
Yeah. I'm really happy that you brought up cultures, because I have a question about, I guess, when a woman realizes this, right? So growing up, maybe she thought, in some cultures, what mom said went, and you have to make mom happy. Or you grow up in this family dynamic where you think it's normal, and this is how everybody spends their life, and this is how every mother has treated every daughter, and this is just what you do. And then you get out in the so-called, the quote unquote real world, right? And you start to realize that the friends that you're making in adulthood, they grew up completely differently, and they see things differently in a different light. And then all of a sudden you almost grieve this relationship that you wish that you would have had with your mother. You grieve the person who's still alive. And I know that you wrote a beautiful blog post on that, but I was hoping that you could touch a little bit on that, on how to, when your mother's still here and you still have a sort of relationship with your mother, but how do you grieve that relationship that was never there? How do you get past that as a woman who's trying to heal this mother wound to become the best version of herself?
Yeah, it's a great question and a very relevant one. And I'd like to share the story of Sarah, who's was one of my clients. And Sarah is an only child, so I'll come back to the culture, but I wanted to bring that example as well because, you know, when you're an only child like Sarah, and Sarah has two parents, mum suffering from unresolved trauma, father suffers from mental illnesses. There are a lot of stories of trauma and abuse in the greater family. And they also lived in a farm, so quite alone, quite remote. And so that sense of burden, that sense of, I don't have a choice. And a choice is a really key word here. I don't have a choice. I have to be the one to care for my mother. In other occasions, for example, some cultural settings, there is that sense that comes from implicit or explicit messages. You don't have a choice. Well, what mother's saying, this is what you need to do. But then, as you say, you go out to the world and you see, oh, there are other ways to live life. And maybe you are drawn to that. So there are two things that I want to kind of consider here. First is with Sarah, we work towards understanding what are the choices that she wants to make. I don't make those assumptions or interpretations or even have any kind of theoretical background in the back of my mind to say, well, this is how you should live your life. Because, as we mentioned, in some cultures, the individual of the Western world is something that will be a complete rupture in the psyche of a woman, and it's also not necessary. We don't necessarily want to get there. So it's really important to see how we can move towards choices. And in order to move towards choices, often the first step is to grieve. Now, this grief is over a person that sometimes is still present physically, but psychologically or emotionally is absent. Sometimes the grief does come when a mother passes away, but the emotional bond is still very, very strong. And a lot of the unresolved issues are still lingering around without an answer. That is referred to as ambiguous loss. When there is partly presence, partly absence. So it creates this kind of confusion. We don't really know how to relate to it. Like, but she's here and she's not here. Or she's not here, but she's still very much here. I worked with another woman, Maria, who is a psychotherapist herself. And when her mother passed away, she was flooded with shame and guilt. She didn't know what to do with. The presence of the relationship with her narcissistic mother was even more apparent and more bold than when her mom was actually alive. So one way or another, it is ambiguous loss. And when I frame that to women, there is already quite a lot of relief because there is an acknowledgement there of something that is both present and absence. There are 3 points to walk through the ambiguous loss that I'm often offering. The first one is the acknowledgement, and with the acknowledgement comes the more balanced way of looking at the potential relationship, what was fulfilled and what hasn't been fulfilled. Because when we look at, as you said, like, how do I grieve a person that is still there? And, how do I move on from that? And especially if the mother is not interested in having that kind of conversation, if she's not interested in offering the closure that you're looking for, then we often tend to think about a relationship, that kind of unsatisfying relationship, from the lens of the unfulfilled potential. So in order to grieve, in order to meet the ambiguous loss, we need to look at both what is present and what is absent. And that sometimes is quite a big chunk of the processing of the healing journey. Because then it means that we begin to release all the pent up charged emotions that we've had since childhood, but we just didn't give them any freedom to take space. Sadness, frustration, disappointment are some of the common feelings. And then the second step is to have some kind of a clarity, like, what that grieving process could offer you. What would become possible when you're on the other side of achieving that closure, that completion? I prefer the concept of completion, because I think that closure brings that kind of an image of closing a door, which is not really possible in a relationship with one's mother. So I have actually a blog around that as well, and a set of questions to get into some kind of clarity. I'm a big fan of clarity. I think that the more clear we can become around our different habits, our different unconscious beliefs and pent up emotions, the better equipped we are to meet our next step and what is possible. And so the third point around that grieving is to look at our own personal inclinations. So, like, what is your favorite season? Is it
Love
autumn?
fall. Yes. Fall.
You
Yeah.
love
Autumn.
to, yeah.
I'm an autumn girl. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm gonna make a leap of faith here and make a kind of like suggest to you and ask, do you find it rather intuitive to come into completion with things and relationships?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are good questions to ask.
Yeah.
So I'm just giving these seasons as a metaphor, but
Mhm.
some of us would be more intuitive in forming a relationship or starting creative endeavors or having kind of being on fire with ideas. And some of us will be less, but they will be more, they will be stronger at maintaining something, maintaining a relationship or maintaining a creative endeavor. And some of us will be stronger at the ending of processes and relationships, and kind of like being more intuitive around finding different inner resources and outer resources in order to come to a completion with something or with someone. So that point of getting to know ourselves better, getting to know, where are our strengths, but also where are our limitations, so we can provide better support for those processes. One of the common things that I see with women, and I know that this has been a huge point for me, especially because my mother has been suffering from chronic depression. So I equated sadness with catastrophe. I equated sadness with, I'm just going to go and fall into the same pit as my mother fell, and I'm going to lose my independency. I'm going to be a burden to other people. you can imagine the dark cloud that was hovering above myself when I just had a bit of sadness. We also don't live, you mentioned movies and films. So much of them are about happy endings and, this magical coming out of financial hardship or a marriage with betrayal, marital betrayal and all the rest of it, where life is always a mix of all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So having space for sadness is a big part of that grieving part, which brings me back to kind of a full circle of looking at the potential that hasn't been fulfilled, but also the potential that has been fulfilled, and processing that sadness, giving space for it, so without the fear that it's going to take over us.
Yeah. So while you were talking about all that, that question you asked me, my mind starts going, right? And the term completion, I think, is a very powerful one because I know that I'm the kind of person who can't let things go. I don't like when I don't have an answer. I don't like when it's not finished, right? For somebody who, look, in a perfect world, we come see you, we have this conversation with her mother, and all of a sudden everything's out there and she says I'm sorry and I say I'm sorry and everything's perfect. In real life, that doesn't happen. Hopefully for some people it does, but really it doesn't happen. So how does somebody start to heal this mother wound when they didn't get that completion part? They thought, okay, I've built up the courage. I'm going to go talk to my mother about all of these issues that I've had. And I'm expecting I'm sorry, or thank you for coming to me, or I understand, but instead I get, what are you talking about? I never did that, or you made me feel this way, or, you talked about narcissistic mothers, and they put it all back on you. When you don't get that completion that you are craving or that you're thinking about, how do you start to heal from that when you'll never get what you want out of it?
Yeah, it's very natural for us to look for that apology and to, in other words, to have that acknowledgement, or in other words, to be seen.
Yeah.
So it can be quite difficult to reconcile with the fact that if we haven't been seen before, the chances of us being fully seen now are even slimmer. And that's what we're dealing with. So I get it when you say, I find it difficult to let go of things and it's not easy for me. I think for most people, we are wired to have certainty. We are wired to have some form of an answer or some form of a resolution, and some of us will look for it more and some of us look for it less. And yes, a part of it will be to learn to be comfortable with uncertainty, because at the end of the day, even though we're in that kind of contradiction of life, it's one of the oxymoron of life. On one hand, we're wired to look for some certainty in order to understand where we stand. On the other hand, at the same time, life is uncertain. Nothing really is certain. So I love the term the apology ache, which I learned about from Kelly McDaniels in her book Mother Hunger, which names that pang of, what do you talk about when you try to initiate a conversation with your mother, or I did my best for you. You're always complaining. Nothing is enough for you. I've got tons of examples of what I'm hearing from the women I work with. And this question, how do I move forward, and what the mother wound healing entails, is one thing I named is becoming more comfortable with uncertainty. And then also say more clearly the gap between you and your mother. and recognizing what is possible. Yeah, recognizing what is possible is taking into account that when you're having that conversation with me, or when other women have that conversation with me, I tend to work with women who've had been on the journey of healing the mother wound for a while, and they're looking for a bit more depth and in the space that they're at, is fleshing out the habits and the limiting beliefs that hold a certain portion of that dynamic stuck in place, and processing that limiting belief. So, for example, if there is a belief that manages you, that if you're not going to solve a problem, if you're not going to fix something, something bad will happen. And now I'm just articulating something that happens very quietly in the back of our mind, in the subconscious kind of dungeons. Yeah, if that belief is managing our daily life, then this is where we're going to put the majority of our attention in healing the mother wound. Yeah. Another example that you brought in earlier, which I will translate into, if I'm not going to be the good daughter, I'm going to be losing my belonging, or be cast out, or be shamed by my community. Yeah, I'm going to feel like a shitty person or a shitty daughter. Yeah. So that belief can be the thing, that kind of hook that holds a portion of that dynamic between you and your mother, an old dynamic, a child or a young dynamic that is still in place because of that belief. So another aspect of that mother wound healing is a form of inner child work, which I think I have quite a specific point of view about that, which doesn't necessarily go into what you as a child did not receive, and now we're kind of finding a way to replace it. But it's noticing or defining those parts in ourselves that remained young, that remained unfulfilled, and that remained emotionally vulnerable because of the absences or the lacks in the relationship with the mother. And that's where we want to supplement that inner child to help her grow up and find the needs that she needs. And it often is very, very surprising how satisfying and how fulfilling and completing it can be to do that with someone who is skilled in relational wound and in mother wound work, to have a witness and a non-judgmental presence, and this limiting beliefs and an inner child work to be met and to receive what we need now. And when we have that experience, because we are experience-based creatures, so you and I are now conversing, and there are a lot of questions and hopefully a lot of helpful input and guidelines in what needs to be followed. But eventually we will need to experience that. It wasn't until I started experiencing Rivka was my first psychologist name that I followed my best friend back then, Lee, that I experienced that unconditional love. I remember when I walked into her room, I had a pact with myself. If I'm going to hear her say, "Look at you, how amazing you became, how you grew up in spite of all these difficulties," I'm going to straight walk away without even explanation. And that's something that I hear from my clients as well, that their experiences of carrying their mother on their back as a child is not acknowledged because they are amazing women, or they are strong. You're a strong woman. You can do that. Yes, and there is a need to experience something else, to be acknowledged in our needs, in our tenderness, all these missing experiences can be really fulfilled in that safe and guided space with another skillful person.
Skillful person. And my listeners know I talk a lot about therapy and how I feel like it's, even if you feel like you're okay, you're quote unquote okay, I feel like therapy is very important, especially as we're finding ourselves in midlife and these things start coming up. But you said it best: when you're a person who's the outsider, you're non-judgmental, you don't know, for example, your clients' mothers. You don't know how they grew up. You're not there as somebody saying, well, you got everything you wanted in life, so why are you sad? Type situation. And I think there's so many of us who grow up thinking, like you said, despite of maybe what happened in our past, we grew up to be strong women, but strong women can break sometimes too. And it's okay not to be okay. And again, I talk a lot about therapy. I have been in therapy myself. I have seen multiple therapists until I found the right one. But my listeners also know I'm a big fan of tools and having tools in a tool belt for everyday life. So sure, you and I can meet once, twice, 3 times a week, whatever, but all those other times, is there a small daily practice maybe, or a mindset shift that can help when something comes up? I mean, it could come up on a Saturday morning when you're walking your dog and all of a sudden you get this pang of guilt or this terrible feeling. Is there a small little daily mindset shift that somebody can take when that happens?
Yes, and so it might be a bit challenging here, but so yes, the first mindset shift that I could offer is asking yourself, am I making an excessive effort now in order to compensate on something or for someone? Just stopping for a moment and asking yourself, am I making an unbalanced effort in order to be acknowledged, in order to be seen, in order to receive love, appreciation, reciprocity, whatever the need is? Because that really ties us back in to the absences in our relationship with our mother. I haven't yet met a woman that that was not the case. So that's a big mindset shift, especially in a society that has toxic productivity from morning till night, which is where I would say, for me, it's not about the tools. Because once you've had an experience, a satisfying experience, once, twice, 3 times of being met, I had a session with a client, Dana, where she grew up in quite a dysfunctional and chaotic environment and had no one to play with. She also had quite a few physical disabilities, so she started walking quite late, which made her physical activities, you can imagine a 3 or 4-year-old, quite limited. And in one of the sessions, it came up organically as part of the conversation, as part of the exploration. And she kind of looked aside and she said, I can see this mattress lying down, which I've prepared for a friend who's going to come visit me, and I feel like jumping on it. And I said, well, go ahead and do that. It's okay to do it. She's kind of looking at it and said, yeah, maybe when we finish. And then she told me that she's had no one to play with when she was a child. And I said, would you like to do it together? And she was glowing. And we just jumped on the mattress together. I'm on my mattress, she's on her mattress. And I heard from her much later on about how fulfilling that experience was. Because when we have the experience that we need to have, we're changed. Our mindset is changed. We already have intuitively the tools because suddenly we think, and this is a belief, I can play now. It's okay to be playful. Yeah, I don't need to just solve problems. This is the antidote to believe that I need to solve the problem, otherwise something will fall apart or someone will fall apart. I can be playful. So, yeah, tools are great, and the mindset shift could be really easy when we start paying attention to the levels of effort we're putting in order to be acknowledged, appreciated, and loved. And when we are able to give ourselves the experiences that will inform our whole body viscerally, our spiritual system, our emotional body, our mind, everything, that it really is okay to step away from the relationship, that it is really okay to speak up your heart. It is really okay to ask to be respected, to be listened to have space. We're changed. We don't need anything else.
Oh, that story just like brought tears to my eyes and gave me chills. I love that so much. And I know I say I love things a lot, but wow. Um, Shelly, I could talk to you for hours. Before we get into where somebody can find you, my last question is for a woman who is listening right now and is feeling overwhelmed because it's like, wow, that's me. Somebody saw me. What's one piece of encouragement that you can offer for her today before she takes this big leap of and it can be a scary step, right? Working on yourself isn't easy. And like you said, if you would have walked into that psychologist's office and said, well, look at you did so well, that's not what you need, right? So it can be a scary thing to what I like to call sit in your shit and figure it out. So what's one piece of encouragement that you could give somebody today just to start healing?
There is a poem by David White. I'm not really good at reciting poems, but the name says it all. Start close in. Forget about the shoulds, where you need to be, or don't forget about them, but you know what? Park them aside for a moment. Start close in from what you feel that is possible for you right now as the most immediate step, the closest that's possible. Because we have a tendency to look at, where we want to be. And that creates a lot of pressure. I know myself, especially when I approach my creative endeavors. As I mentioned earlier, I have a very prolific imagination, and I can immediately see where the project could go or where I could be when I take upon myself that creative endeavor. And that always brings up an immediate overwhelm, because instead of starting closing in, I'm immediately 10 or even 100 steps away, and that's too big of a gap to bridge. So if that's happening right now, the best place to start with is take a deep breath, drink a glass of water, and think about what would be the most achievable, doable next immediate step for me. That's all. Maybe you want to give a call to your friend and say, hey, I've listened to that amazing conversation and I feel I need to offload some feelings. Maybe it's taking a walk in the forest or by the beach, or go to the mall and surround yourself with some noise and people to feel that you're not alone. Whatever it is. And maybe it is giving a call to that therapist that you've been postponing for a while.
Oh, Shelly, thank you so much for being here. I know that people are going to want to find you. They're going to want to look at your work. They're going to want to work with you. You're in the process of writing a book, correct?
Yes.
But until then, where
Yeah.
can my listeners find you? Where can they listen to this special? By the way, listeners, it's a special private podcast, so you have to reach out to get it. But I encourage that you do. But where can we find you and sign up for all these wonderful things that you're doing right now?
So the best place really, we talked about effort and we talked about the sense that something is our fault. Yeah, that it's our fault or our responsibility. And the best place to have some immediate possible guidance for that is to go to shellysharon.com/birthright with RIT and binge on these 3 short podcast episodes to get practical as well as nourishing input to healing the mother wound. That is really the best place to find me. I'm also hanging out more on Substack, which is Women of Ash and Honey. So this is where there is a lot of my personal reflections and personal journeys. And if someone wants to have a more guided and practical tools for dealing with different situations, like we've mentioned, I have a blog post on closure, I have a blog post on ambiguous grief and what is the mother wound, and many, many more. It's shellysharon.com/blog.
Love it. And I'll make sure to link everything in the show notes. Shelly, thank you so much for the conversation today. I know you're going to help a lot of people out there, and I look forward to seeing what you do next.
Thank you, Jen. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. Stick around here for just a second. Thank you so much for joining me today for this powerful conversation with Shelly. I really hope that her insights on healing and reclaiming yourself and navigating complexities of midlife relationships landed for you the way they did for me. Please make sure that you go check out shellysharon.com. She's got a lot of really great resources. And if it really hit home, reach out to her. Tell her about it. Share it with a friend. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast and leave a review because it really helps me. But listen, before I wrap up today, I've got something so fun coming up next week. So if you've ever wondered what happened to sitcoms, game shows, or on the radio, let's just say I've got a guest lined up who's coming to take us right back to that feeling, but with a whole new perspective. It's going to be a mix of nostalgia, laughter, and some real talk about mental health and what we can do to not only take care of ourselves, but be supportive for the men out there in our lives, whether it's a partner, a boyfriend, a brother, a dad, whoever. But you're not going to want to miss this conversation because it's going to be powerful and so much fun. So make sure you're subscribed to the Midlife Edit wherever you listen to your podcasts, and be excited, because I am. Until next week, this is the Midlife Edit. Let's make it a damn good chapter.